is Ukraine's EU membership isn't just a political move, but a game changer for Europe's security. Meanwhile, can direct peace talks finally happen as Turkish President Erdogan is pushing for a historic summit with Zelensky, Trump, and Putin? And on the other side, Russia's once massive rainy day fund is running dry fast. Is the financial storm about to burst? Let's break it all down and put you in focus on these hot events. This is UATV English. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and socials to stay ahead of the curve. Ukraine is on a fast track to EU membership. But it's not just about politics or economics, it's about securing Europe's future. As Brussels advances the first negotiation clusters, there's a key challenge: Hungary's veto. But despite these obstacles, Ukraine has made remarkable strides. Thanks to consistent reforms, Ukraine has already met critical benchmarks on the path to EU membership. But here's the game changer: Ukraine's army is setting new standards for military innovation. Denmark and the UK are already adopting Ukraine's battlefield tactics, while Finland and Poland are integrating Ukrainian drone warfare strategies into their own training programs. Stick with us as we dive into how Ukraine's military ingenuity is becoming a cornerstone for European defense.
Europe is preparing to open the first negotiation clusters with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Brussels is developing a parallel negotiations mechanism to bypass Hungary's veto, according to media reports. Though EU commissioners have not disclosed the full details of this Plan B, anonymous sources confirm that certain legal steps have already been taken within its framework.
We also absolutely need to take.
We must sustain the reform momentum in Ukraine, help our member states resolve their concerns, and ultimately respond to the greatest security challenge since World War II. 36 reform indicators have been achieved thanks to consistent efforts in traditional reforms, anti-corruption, energy market liberalization, corporate governance, and business climate. These reforms, accomplished under the most difficult conditions, are not abstract. They directly support Ukraine's EU accession and bring it closer to the Union politically, legally, and economically.
The Ukrainian government has already approved its negotiating positions for the first, second, and sixth clusters, which Kyiv must work through with Brussels as part of its EU accession process. The sixth cluster, in particular, will allow Ukraine to contribute to Europe's secure future and protect the continent from the Russian threat.
We covered the distance from applying for EU membership to launching pre-accession talks at record speed. Our ambitious goal for 2025 is to open all 6 negotiation clusters with the EU in parallel. It's important that the European Commission shares our optimism and is already set to launch talks on Cluster 1 in June.
The idea that the Ukrainian army will form the backbone of European security after the country joins the EU has been repeatedly voiced by European leaders. Some countries are already actively adopting the combat experience of Ukraine's armed forces. For example, Denmark has announced its intention to send troops to Ukraine for training and instruction, while the UK plans to incorporate Ukrainian battlefield technology use into its own strategies. Finland and Poland are already integrating Ukraine's drone warfare tactics into their joint training programs.
It's promising to develop these technologies because Europe will arm itself regardless, and it will want all the technologies we've refined during the full-scale invasion.
The Operation Spiderweb, conducted over a year and a half by Ukraine's security service and personally overseen by President Volodymyr Zelensky, showcased Ukraine's unconventional military thinking. Within minutes of the operation's launch, dozens of videos appeared online showing trucks with wooden huts, from which drones took off. Footage of burning Russian fighter jets quickly circulated across Western media. Analysts concluded that Ukraine has just rewritten the rules of warfare.
This is a powerful strike against one of the key components of Russia's nuclear triad, its strategic aviation. Everyone saw them burning. There's video. 40 aircraft. I don't think all 40 were destroyed, but some were damaged. It's a black day for Russian aviation. Small, cheap drones delivered a powerful blow to massive strategic aircraft.
Fearing possible isolation from U.S. support, NATO's European member states are studying Ukraine's tactics for suppressing Russian air defenses. This comes from a report by the Royal United Services Institute, based on actual combat operations and an analysis of Russia's use of surface-to-air missile systems. If the U.S. does withdraw its troops from Europe, the continent's countries will need to expand their armed forces by 300,000 personnel and increase defense spending by $250 billion annually. according to analysts at Bruegel and the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. The report also states, quote, "The top priority for Europe is supporting Ukraine, as Ukraine's armed forces remain a critical deterrent against potential Russian aggression toward EU countries." Reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
Russia's once massive rainy day fund is now running dry and really fast. It's lost 2/3 of its value since the start of the war against Ukraine. And with oil prices falling, inflation climbing, and Moscow digging deeper into military spending, ordinary Russians are footing the bill. Sky-high interest rates, empty shelves, and potatoes that cost more than meat. This isn't just economic turbulence, it's a full-blown storm. So how long can the Kremlin keep patching holes before the whole thing bursts? Let's see.
Russia's National Wealth Fund decreased by $6 billion last month, according to Bloomberg. Thus, less than $36 billion remain in the fund. Moscow is using the fund to cover budget deficits and support the social sector. According to the outlet's calculations, since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the fund has lost 68% of its assets. Due to instability in the global energy market, the Kremlin is unable to replenish it, analysts explain.
Plans to replenish the reserves this year with excess oil and gas revenue have been derailed by a drop in the cost of crude, triggered by U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war. Lower oil prices have forced the government to cut its forecast for energy income by 24% and triple its projected budget deficit, from a publication by Bloomberg.
When drafting the 2025 budget, Moscow planned to sell oil at $70 per barrel. After Washington applied tariff leverage, OPEC plus countries, which account for over 60% of oil production, agreed to increase fuel production rates, causing global prices to collapse. Currently, Russian oil grades are sold at approximately $57 per barrel. The shortfall in revenues is forcing the central bank to maintain a tight monetary policy.
We have lowered the global economic growth rate. We slightly reduced the oil price estimate because this is the main channel of impact on the Russian economy from these tariff wars. It's the reduction in prices for our main export goods. Risks remain. To reduce inflation, we need to maintain tight monetary and credit conditions for a long time.
The consequences of this policy are primarily felt by small businesses. The high key interest rate of 21% prevents the development of small enterprises due to expensive loans. Additionally, the central bank maintains an exchange rate of 80 rubles per dollar, which, according to experts, is overvalued and also negatively affects Russian businesses.
Why is this happening? Because Russians are prohibited from withdrawing their dollar deposits from banks in foreign currency. They must convert them at a virtual exchange rate into rubles and receive rubles. So this temporary cushion that still allows industry and banks to function to some extent is at the expense of people. Other sectors besides the military economy are declining. Agriculture, in particular, will suffer significantly because a large crop failure is expected.
The decline in consumer industries leads to a shortage of goods and their rising costs. According to official statistics, monthly inflation in the first half of 2025 has held at 10%. However, according to a central bank survey, citizens' inflationary expectations are rising and already exceed official figures by 4%. Moreover, state statistics do not account for the difference in price increases for products consumed by wealthy and poor segments of the population.
Above the general inflation level, basic products are consistently becoming more expensive. Potatoes, a staple of the poor's diet, have risen the most, by 160%, followed closely by onions and cabbage. Fish, vegetable oil, dairy products, and bread also outpace overall inflation. Thus, the majority of the population bears the full burden of the inflation of the poor, which even the pro-government Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting estimates at 17%. Therefore, it's not surprising that citizens' inflationary expectations exceed official figures. In light of reality, they can even be called optimistic. From a publication by The Insider.
But the Kremlin has no intention of helping vulnerable population groups or increasing funding for social programs. While Russian leadership sets records for financing the military-industrial complex, spending on other sectors remains at a minimum. In 2025, military-industrial complex expenditures increased by a quarter, while the social policy budget item has not moved from the mark of 7,200 billion rubles. Reported by Andriy Dimitrenko, UATV News.
Turkish President Erdogan has proposed bringing Zelensky, Trump, and Putin to the negotiating table, with Turkey ready to lead the peace talks. Again, Erdogan envisions Istanbul as a peace hub, with the US and Russia seemingly open to the idea. While the White House has already expressed support and President Trump is reportedly willing to join the discussions. But what's the catch? The latest round of negotiations in Istanbul saw Russia's unrealistic demands, and Moscow's tactics of dragging out talks is becoming clear right now. While Trump may play a pivotal role here, Russia is just buying time. So let's see how these high-stakes talks could shape the future of the war against Ukraine.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has proposed bringing together Zelensky, Trump, and Putin at one table. According to the Turkish leader, he is ready to join the talks himself. Erdogan emphasized that Turkey is becoming one of the key centers of peace diplomacy.
I would like to bring together Putin and Zelensky in Istanbul or Ankara, and even take Mr. Trump along. If they agree, I would like to meet with them at these talks, and thus turn Istanbul into a center for peace settlement. We will take steps in this direction after this latest meeting.
The United States responded positively to the Turkish leader's proposal. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that U.S. President Donald Trump is ready to participate in potential talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and dictator Putin.
Well, the president has said he's open to it if it comes to that, but he wants both of these leaders and both sides to sit down at the table together.
As a reminder, the second round of negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian delegations took place on June 2nd in Istanbul. The meeting lasted just over an hour. Its outcomes included an agreement to exchange severely wounded soldiers and servicemen up to 25 years old on an all-for-all basis. Additionally, the Ukrainian delegation handed over to the Russian side a list of Ukrainian children deported to Russia, demanding their immediate return. The Russian delegation, in turn, finally presented a memorandum outlining conditions for a possible truce. Shortly afterward, Russian media published the document's text. Moscow issued ultimatum demands, including Ukraine's surrender of territories, some of which are not occupied by Russian forces. That same day, on NTV, U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, stated that White House Chief Donald Trump has lost patience with resolving Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
President Trump has lost patience. Thanks to Turkey's intervention now and the resolution of operational issues, a meeting of leaders at the highest level can take place, and I believe we can resolve this issue for all participants.
The unrealistic demands outlined in the Russian memorandum were reinforced by a statement from Russian Security Council Chairman Medvedev. He openly declared that the Istanbul talks are not aimed at, quote, a compromise peace, but at securing a swift and complete victory for the Kremlin. According to analysts, Moscow is not interested in achieving peace, but is using the negotiation process to buy time and maintain the appearance of dialogue.
They don't want to derail it. They want to make it so that we derail it. And if that doesn't work, to keep this talk going longer. Because, for whoever else, an angry Trump is very advantageous to Russia. He allows them to do what they're doing.
However, it seems Washington has seen through Russia's tactic of dragging out negotiations. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham responded to Medvedev's statement, emphasizing that Moscow has revealed its true intentions to the world.
Congratulations to Mr. Medvedev for a rare moment of honesty coming from the Russian propaganda machine. I appreciate you making it clear to the world that Putin and Russia are not remotely interested in peace. Lindsey Graham, Republican United States Senator, on X.
Among the possible levers of pressure on Moscow being considered in Washington is a new package of restrictive measures. According to The Hill, U.S. Senate representatives from both parties are already coordinating a large-scale sanctions bill. It is supported by 80 senators. Among other things, it provides for the imposition of 500% tariffs on Russian energy resources for importing countries. However, the document has not yet been put to a vote. Republicans are awaiting the green light from U.S. President Donald Trump. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
The future of Europe is indeed at stake. From Ukraine's critical role in Europe's security to the peace talks proposal, everything's at crossroads. And meanwhile, Russia's economy is on the brink. So, will the EU embrace Ukraine fully, and can peace talks actually break the deadlock? Or is Moscow just stalling for more time? What do you think here? Drop your thoughts in the comments and always stay in focus with UATV English.